She answered a call in Dutch, just one sentence. And suddenly the billionaire froze mid-step. The entire hotel lobby went silent, and security was called to escort her out. Why? Because a black maid wasn't supposed to speak like that. Not in his world. And definitely not in a language that could expose everything he was hiding. Behind her stood a marble concierge with a gold-plated name tag and a face full of contempt. And beside him the CEO whose empire was about to burn because of the woman they all called just the help. They didn't know she carried 5 languages. They didn't know she carried secrets. They didn't know she carried truth. They called me girl again. Not miss, not ma'am, not even you. Just girl. Girl, clean that up, would you? He spilled his champagne. The tall concierge's voice cracked like a whip through the hushed opulence of the Royale Haven Hotel lobby. Guests turned their heads slightly, but said nothing. Their eyes slid past me as if I were part of the furniture, no less than that. Furniture gets polished. I got avoided, and yet I was the only one who heard the whisper in Dutch that changed everything. It was a Monday. It always starts on a Monday, doesn't it? My name is Amara Bennett, 28, born in Atlanta, raised in Harlem, now stuck between cleaning suites and dodging rich insults in a hotel I can barely afford to look at from the outside. My mother used to say, be twice as good for half as much. I used to believe that, until I realized being twice as good doesn't matter if they already decided you're invisible. That morning, the chandelier above the main hall sparkled with ridiculous grandeur. I was scrubbing the corner near the golden archway, my knees aching, when my phone buzzed inside my apron pocket. We weren't allowed personal calls on the floor, but something told me to pick it up, and so I did. I pressed the phone to my ear and whispered, Hallo, ja, ik ben op mijn werk, zeg het maar snel. The words were Dutch, sharp, clean, slicing through the air. I didn't even realize he was watching. The man behind the grand piano, the one in the tailored navy suit, with the steel-gray temples and a face that could melt stock markets. Mr. Philip Langston, billionaire, tech tycoon, the ghost of Silicon Valley, they called him. I hadn't even seen him walk in, but as I ended the call and turned back to my mop, I heard the click of Italian leather shoes approaching. Slowly, purposefully. You speak Dutch, he said. Not a question, a statement. I turned, startled. Yes, sir. My father's from Rotterdam. His eyes narrowed, not unkindly, more curious, like someone peering into a locked vault and finding it cracked open. What else do you speak? I swallowed. English, French, Spanish, a bit of German. He looked me up and down, not the way men look at women, but the way professors look at puzzles they weren't expecting to solve. Come with me, he said. And just like that the whispers started. The concierge stiffened. Sir, she's just staff. Philip didn't even glance at him. Exactly. She's staff. And she may be the most interesting person in this building. They all watched me follow him. Past the velvet ropes, past the gold-rimmed elevators, into a world I'd only cleaned from the outside. But I didn't smile. I didn't trust this. Not yet. Because in my world, curiosity from powerful men always came with a price. The moment the elevator doors sealed shut behind us, I felt the weight of the silence. No hum of the lobby, no stares from staff, no champagne-slick laughter of the rich echoing off the marble. Just me, a mop-scented uniform, and him, Philip Langston, whose net worth danced in headlines and whose name made hotel managers sweat. He didn't look at me right away, just stared at the digital numbers climbing 12, 14, 16. Finally, he spoke. Your accent. He said Rotterdam, but not pure. Surinamese influence. I blinked. Yes. My father's family moved from Paramaribo in the 80s. He met my mother in a Dutch literature class at NYU. She thought he was pretentious. He thought she was brilliant. They married anyway. A flicker, barely visible, twitched across his lips. Amusement. Memory, regret. You've read Couperus, he asked. I prefer Multatuli. Max Havelaar made me furious. That made him pause. The elevator dinged. Penthouse. I'd never seen it. None of the staff had. It was sacred ground locked behind retina scanners and access cards that we weren't born privileged enough to hold. The doors opened. My breath caught. Cream-colored marble flowed into gold-veined pillars. A sculpture of two entwined cranes stood in the center of a sunlit atrium. Glass walls revealed the skyline of Manhattan like a painting framed by heaven itself. And there at the end of a long onyx table sat a tablet. Open. Waiting. Philip motioned. Sit. I hesitated. I should get back. The maid supervisor will dock my shift. He finally looked at me. Looked like I was a chessboard, and he was calculating every move I didn't know I was making. I own this building. I think we can waive the time card. I sat. He turned the tablet toward me. Dutch. Legal contracts. International tech trade. Translate this, he said. No dictionary, no AI, just you. My fingers hovered. My mouth went dry. But I began, and as I spoke I watched his jaw tighten. Not with doubt, but with recognition. I translated clause after clause from import rights to EU intellectual property codes. I caught a misprint in subsection 14b. I even corrected a mistranslation from a previous firm's interpretation. When I finished, the room was dead quiet. My heart thundered. Then he whispered, God help me. I froze. Sir? He stepped back, fingers running through his silver-threaded hair. You have no idea what you just unraveled, he muttered. And then, from behind a hidden panel, a woman in a red dress stepped into the room. Tall, blonde, cold as steel. Who is she? The woman asked, voice slicing like glass. Someone with more value in 5 minutes than your entire legal team gave me in 5 months. He said, voice suddenly sharp. She narrowed her eyes at me. She's a maid. I stood slowly. No, I said. I'm a linguist. My degree is from Columbia. My GPA was perfect. But no one cared once they saw my skin and my job history. Silence. Philip looked at me. You just caught a $300 million fraud buried in that contract. They were laundering through language hiding in idioms, slipping clauses past translation loopholes. You stopped it. I wanted to scream, laugh, cry. All I did was whisper I was just answering a phone call. I didn't leave the penthouse. Not by choice. Philip paced the room, his jaw locked, as if every word that came to mind had to fight through a storm to reach his lips. The woman in red, he called her Elisa, stood frozen, her arms, folded fingers like daggers tapping against her arm. You're telling me, Elisa hissed, that a maid just exposed a multi-continent fraud ring we've spent 2 years trying to trace. I'm telling you, Philip said, never breaking eye contact with me. She just saved our entire board from unknowingly becoming accomplices. They were both silent. But their silence spoke fluently. And I felt like I'd just stepped into a war I didn't know existed. Let me back up. I used to believe words had power. Turns out they can also be weapons, especially when you're the only one in the room who understands them. The contract I had translated clause by clause was not just about a tech deal. It was a Trojan horse. Deep inside, the language were embedded conditional phrases, legal traps buried under centuries-old Dutch business law. The kind of language only someone with cultural fluency and academic training could parse. But I wasn't supposed to see it. I wasn't supposed to be there. And now I was a liability. Amara Phillip said finally, "This is going to sound strange, but I need you to stay. For now." I frowned. "Stay," he nodded. "We're flying in a forensic translation team from The Hague. But I want you to be present. You cracked this. You deserve to see it through. And if I say no, you can walk," he said calmly, "and pretend none of this happened. But if you do, there are people in this world who will want to make sure you never speak again. They don't like loose threads, and you just unraveled the hem of their empire." My throat went dry. Elisa crossed the room, heels clicking like gunshots. "You want her involved? She's staff. No NDA, no clearance." "No. She's smart," Philip snapped. "And that's more than I can say for your last 5 hires." Her face turned stone. He turned to me again, softer now. "Have you ever had power, Amara?" I didn't answer. He continued. "It's terrifying, especially when it finds you before you're ready." They gave me a room, not one of the staff quarters where you could hear every pipe groan at night. A suite, room 2904, floor-to-ceiling windows, silk sheets, a view of the city that made Harlem feel like another planet. But I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the skyline, wondering how my day started with a mop and ended in a corporate conspiracy. Then came the knock. 3 soft taps. I opened the door. It was the bellhop, eyes wide, hands trembling. He slipped me a note and vanished. I unfolded the paper. It was written in Dutch. 1 sentence. You weren't supposed to see that. No name, no return address, no signature. My heart pounded. My mouth turned to ash. I turned the note over. A single watermark. Forreston Holding B.V. I knew that name. My father used to whisper it with disgust. A Dutch megacorp. Ancient money. Colonial roots. Dirty secrets. The same name buried in the fine print of the contract I translated. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about a billionaire's business deal. This was about something far older and far more dangerous, and I was now a threat to it. I held the note until my fingers trembled. The name burned into my eyes like a scar I hadn't known I carried my whole life. Forreston Holding Beefy. I whispered it under my breath again, this time in Dutch, and for a moment it didn't sound like words. It sounded like history, like something old and buried and angry. I called my father. He hadn't answered my last 3 calls. But tonight, after that note, he picked up after 1 ring. "Papa," I said, voice thin. "Why didn't you ever tell me about Forreston Holding?" Silence. Then came a breath. Long. Hollow. "Who told you that name?" I found it in a contract I was asked to translate. "Someone. They sent me a warning. A note." He sighed again, deeper this time. "I hoped it would never touch you," he said. "But I suppose the rot always finds its way through the floorboards." He didn't speak in metaphors unless something terrified him. And then my father, my quiet kind, awkward Dutchman who used to cry during documentaries and bake bread when he was nervous, told me a story. His father, my grandfather, had once worked for Forreston Holding, a logistics assistant. It sounded harmless, until one day he found documents, manifestos, shipment records, logs of colonial artifacts and resources that had never made it into public archives. It was more than exploitation. It was cultural theft, masked as trade. He reported it to Dutch authorities. 2 weeks later, he was dead. Heart attack, they said. But my grandmother knew. They all knew. My father was 15. He fled to New York on a student visa, married my mother, tried to bury his past in books and silence. He warned me always to stay low, stay unseen, stay quiet. And now here I was, in a silk sheet suite, with the same name that had killed his father staring back at me in crisp watermark. "You have to walk away, Amara," he said, voice shaking. "They don't care who you are. They don't kill with bullets. They kill with absence. You'll disappear." "I can't," I whispered. "It's already too late." The next morning, the hotel was different. Not visibly. The chandeliers still sparkled. The lobby piano still hummed soft jazz. The guests still drifted in with fake smiles and real wallets. But there was tension in the air. Philip called for me. He looked exhausted, his usual precision now unraveling at the edges. He'd been up all night, eyes darting between forensic reports and translations. "They've moved their money," he said. "Already. Offshore. Cayman. Liechtenstein. The whole board is compromised. Vorsten Holding was laundering through our merger, and your team didn't see it. They weren't meant to," he said grimly. "They were paid not to." Elisa barged in. She looked furious. "The press got a leak," she hissed. "Anonymous, about the contract, about her." I stood. "Me." Elisa tossed a tablet on the table. "Maid, or Mole. The bilingual janitor who hacked a billionaire's deal. My photo, blurry, stolen. The headline dripped poison. The kind designed to dismiss and dismantle. You're being painted as a criminal," Philip said. "A con, a plant. And you think that's an accident," I shot back. "This is how they do it. Discredit, degrade, destroy." He looked at me as if truly seeing the world I came from for the first time. "What do we do?" he asked. I stared at him. "You fight fire with fire," I said. "And I know exactly where to aim the first match." That night, I took a cab to a different side of Manhattan. Not the high rises, the back streets. The community center where my old college professor still taught language justice workshops. Professor Umaira Aziz. A woman who had spent her life translating for immigrants, victims, whistleblowers, and training others to do the same. She hugged me the moment she saw me. "They came after you," she asked softly. "They're about to regret it." We sat. We mapped. We pulled up every archived contract tied to Vorsten Holding. Every linguistic inconsistency. Every suspicious phrasing that allowed theft to wear the mask of trade. By dawn we had a file. Not just a file. A weapon. A linguistic report cross-referencing decades of deliberate mistranslation designed to hide corruption. And we had something else too. My voice. The sky over Manhattan was bruised with gray as I stepped into the studio lobby of Global Now News. The air buzzed with fluorescent light and static nerves. I wore a pressed black blazer borrowed from Professor Umaira and a pair of flats that still had janitorial dust in their soles. But I walked in like I owned the damn place. Beside me was Rachel Miles, a journalist feared for the same reason some people feared hurricanes: unpredictable, powerful, impossible to ignore. "I don't want sensational," I told her. "You'll get truth," she said. "And if we're lucky, justice." A makeup assistant touched my face. Another clipped a mic to my collar. The camera guy muttered something about lighting. But all I could hear was my father's voice in my head. They kill with absence. They tried. But I was still here, and I was about to speak in a way they couldn't silence. Rolling in 3, 2, the red light blinked. Rachel looked at me, calm, intent. "We're here with Amara Bennett, former hotel employee, and now whistleblower at the center of an international scandal, involving Vorsten Holding BV. Amara, what did you discover? I looked straight into the camera, into the living rooms of thousands, maybe millions, and I told the truth about the contract, about the Dutch clauses, about the linguistic sleight of hand used to smuggle money launder profits and erase accountability across borders and generations. I showed the clause with the conditional subjunctive that disguised a loophole. I showed the harmless phrases that bound companies to illegal transfers. And then I held up the note they had sent me. You weren't supposed to see this, I read aloud. But I did. And now you do too. That night, the world shifted. The interview exploded across the internet. The maid who knew became a trending tag. Not that I liked it, but it was louder than silence. So I let it ride. Rachel's newsroom confirmed with former Vorsten employees, most under NDAs, that similar contracts had circulated for years. Philip's legal team went public. Press releases, board resignations, shareholders in revolt. But with every candle we lit, the darkness crawled closer. 2 days later, I came home to find my suite door ajar. Inside, it looked untouched except for my father's photo, face down on the nightstand. Its glass cracked clean through. No one stole anything. They just wanted me to know they had been there, a threat wrapped in silence. My hands shook. I didn't sleep that night, but I didn't run either, because the next morning I got an email. No subject, just a file. Old video footage. 1992. Rotterdam. My grandfather, speaking into a mic. Dutch crackling but clear. I fear that history will forget our words, that they will twist them, profit from them, that they will buy silence through translation. Tears welled in my eyes. That file was a missing piece, proof that my family had been fighting this battle long before me, that I wasn't alone. By noon, Philip had summoned me to a private board meeting. Not just his board. The UN Economic Ethics Tribunal. They're calling for an investigation into every major multinational using translation to bypass law, he said. And they want you to testify. I stared at the invite. Digital. Clean. Unbelievable. They'll call me emotional, angry, unqualified. They'll be right, he said, leaning forward. But you'll still be right. That night, I stood before a sea of suits in Geneva. Men with earpieces, women with pens sharp as scalpels. I looked different than them, sounded different, but for the first time I didn't shrink. I unfolded a Dutch contract from 1984, then 1997, then 2023. Same language tricks, same lies, same silence. My name is Amara Bennett, I said, voice steady. I was a hotel maid, a daughter, a descendant of the silenced. But I know how to read, and I know what was hidden. And now, you do too. They clapped, not all of them. Not the diplomats with tight lips and tighter ties. Not the executives hiding behind lanyards and translation headsets. But enough. The kind of slow, deliberate applause that says, "We hear you. We just don't know what to do with you yet." After the testimony, I stepped into a hallway of cameras, questions, and flashbulbs. Philip met me there, his face unreadable. "You were brilliant," he said. I gave him a tired smile. Brilliant doesn't always mean safe. He nodded a little too quickly. "Let's get you out of here." But as we stepped outside the tribunal building in Geneva, my phone buzzed. Again. Again. Dozens of missed calls from Professor Umaira, from my father, from unknown numbers. And then a message appeared. "Turn on the news." I tapped into a live stream from Global Now. Rachel Miles, sitting alone at the news desk. No music, no banner, just silence. Then she spoke. This morning, leaked documents suggest that Amara Bennett, former hotel employee turned whistleblower, may have falsified credentials in her translation of the Vorston holding contract. Sources allege that Ms. Bennett was coached by tech CEO Philip Langston to fabricate legal inconsistencies for personal and corporate gain. My chest collapsed. Philip didn't flinch. I turned to him. "Tell me this is fake." He stared ahead. Cold. Quiet. That silence was his answer. "You used me," I whispered. "You were already on fire," he said. "I just handed you gasoline." My knees nearly gave out. "You told me I stopped a fraud." "You did," he said. "But fraud isn't always illegal. And sometimes exposing one buys you leverage for the next." Everything unraveled in my mind at once. The suite, the praise, the documents, the sudden access. I wasn't a threat to Vorston. I was a weapon, one he had pointed. And now that the shot was fired, I was expendable. "You set me up," I said. He didn't deny it. "Why?" I asked, barely above a whisper. "Because you were the perfect story," he said. The maid, the underdog, the voice of justice. Everyone eats that up. But this is business, Amara. You should have known how that ends. They took everything. The suite, my credentials, my identity. Articles turned overnight. From heroin to fraud. Even Professor Umaira called me, tears in her voice. "They say you doctored files, Amara." "I didn't," I said. "But now no one knows what to believe." She wasn't wrong. And then came the worst call of all. My father. He didn't even say hello. Just one question. "Did you use your grandfather's death for attention?" My soul cracked. "No," I said. "Papa, I swear." But the line was already dead. That night I wandered Geneva's empty streets, stripped of everything, powerless again, a ghost in borrowed shoes. And then I saw the graffiti. One word, "Liar," spray-painted in red outside the tribunal building. Under it in Dutch, "We silence what we can't control." I didn't sleep that night. But I didn't hide either. Instead, I pulled every file I had, every voice memo, every video of my grandfather, every phrase, every clause, every threat. I compiled it, and I uploaded it all to an open-source archive. No passwords, no firewalls, no secrets. If they were going to erase me, I'd leave behind something they couldn't delete. The next morning, the archive went viral. Thousands of translators around the world began reviewing it. Journalists, historians, lawyers, victims. They started connecting dots. It wasn't just Vorston. It was a global pattern, a centuries-old system, and I had lit the fuse. By dawn, the world had seen the truth. Not my truth, the truth. The digital archive I released, titled "The Language They Stole," was dissected in real time across the globe. Thousands of linguists and legal experts pored over it, confirming everything I had found, and more. Governments began quietly launching internal reviews. 2 members of Vorston Holdings' advisory board stepped down. Others vanished off the grid. But none of that brought back my name. Not yet. I was still the maid who lied, the girl who tricked a billionaire, the voice that burned too loud. I watched from a rooftop cafe in Amsterdam alone, anonymous, where my father once stood looking at the river and told me stories of what language could build and destroy. Then came the call. It was from Rachel Miles. I almost didn't answer, but when I did, her voice was quiet, shaken. "They tried to make me read that statement," she said. "The one accusing you. They cornered me 2 hours before airtime." I stalled, asked for verification, but someone in the network had already pushed it live. I didn't know. I said nothing. She continued. Now we know who. Forston had ties to two Global Now shareholders. They bought the segment. Of course they did. When they couldn't kill the message, they poisoned the messenger. Rachel was crying now. You were right. And I failed you. No, I said softly. You just spoke in a room full of silence. That's never easy. Later that week, something strange happened. Emails poured in. From college students in Nairobi, professors in Berlin, a community court translator in Jakarta. All of them had read the archive. All of them had found pieces of their lives in it. Mistranslations that led to lost property. Missed asylum cases. Erased indigenous voices. Centuries of minor language errors that stole land identity freedom. What started as one Maid story had become a movement. They began tagging it. Or not just a word. I smiled through tears. Then came the invitation. The United Nations General Assembly. An independent panel on global language justice wanted me to testify again. This time, not as a whistleblower, but as an expert. I stood in front of that curved marble wall. My nameplate said, Amara Bennett, linguist, survivor, citizen. No more janitor jokes. No more mockery. I looked out at diplomats, activists, scholars. I told them about the power of nuance. How translation is never neutral. How systems of power had always relied on misinterpreted contracts forced bilingualism erasure of mother tongues. Language is not just words I said, it is memory, culture, resistance. They listened. They really listened. After the panel, a man approached me, elderly, South Asian, in tears. I lost my farmland because of a mistranslation during British rule, he whispered. I never thought anyone would care. I held his hand. I care. Back in Harlem, my father opened the door before I even knocked. He didn't say anything. Just wrapped his arms around me and didn't let go. I'm sorry, I doubted, he whispered. No, I said, holding back tears. I needed you to be afraid, because it meant you still cared if I lived. We sat on the porch watching the sun go down, and for the first time in weeks, I felt the air return to my lungs. A month later, Philip Langston was subpoenaed. Forston Holding was under full international investigation. Their records, once sealed, were now part of the world's first language justice archive. And me, I started teaching night classes, free, for immigrant women, domestic workers, refugees. I called it Power in the Mother Tongue, because if they're going to try to silence us, then every woman I train will know how to scream back in every language they can't control. In the end, they tried to erase her, tried to call her a liar, a fake, a maid who got lucky. But the world didn't forget. Because truth, when spoken clearly, echoes longer than money whispers. She lost everything, then gained something greater, a voice, a movement, and a legacy they couldn't translate or silence. Sometimes justice doesn't come from power. It comes from courage, from knowing who you are even when the world says you're nothing. Because when you speak truth in a language they can't twist, you don't just survive. You change everything. Have you ever been underestimated, silenced, told to stay in your place? Share your story. We're building a community where voices like yours are finally heard. Like if this story moved you. Subscribe for more real, raw, and powerful stories like this. And remember, they called her a maid, but she spoke like a revolution.